Hi, I'm Kris Theophanous from CEO at Bradbury Tracks Limited, and I have pleasure to have with me today Liza Rowles, who's client director at Seymour Taylor, to talk to us about demystifying R&D tax credits. Welcome, Lisa. How are you doing?
Good morning, Chris. No, I'm good. Thank you very much. Yes, a pleasure to be here this morning and to chat to you about the wild world of R&D tax credits and how we might be able to help some people out there.
Yeah, it's a pitfall we can all fall into. I mean, I have to hold my hands up straight away now, and say that we have claimed for R&D tax credits in the past
Mhm.
and had to refund the government £50,000 because we didn't do it properly. So this is a very interesting one for me and very close to my heart because I know the benefits and what can go wrong. So it will be a very good topic for us to discuss. But first of all, why does this matter to us SMEs? What do you think?
I think R&D tax relief is one of those areas where people have, as you say, potentially there's been errors that people have claimed and things have gone wrong in the past. But fundamentally, for an SME business, it can be really crucial. Certainly to startup businesses, in terms of it's either a reduction to their tax liability, obviously brilliant, or potentially they're in a position where they're actually getting cash back from HMRC. Now, for those startup businesses, that cash can be absolutely critical and can genuinely make or break a business getting going in those early years. So it really is important to get it right if you think you are eligible and to hit the right markers at the right time because HMRC are making life more difficult in many ways on the administrative side, but I think it's the right thing for them to be doing as well. There have been a lot of firms that have made claims that perhaps shouldn't have made, but the rules which are coming in place now just tighten up around the edges, and make sure that the right businesses are claiming the right amount at the right times. And that's hopefully where we can come in and help our clients out as well.
Brilliant. What counts as R&D? I mean, other than sort of when I think of R&D, when I used to think about R&D, I used to think of sort of people in lab coats doing
Mhm.
experiments on things that have never been done before. What counts as R&D to as far as the HMRC are concerned?
I mean, R&D is one of those things that a lot of people think of as primarily pharmaceutical businesses, and obviously, of course, those businesses will no doubt have something in there which is qualifying. But research and development has quite specific definitions, and the main point of it is that there is an increase in science or technology in a field, and what that generally means is if there was what the HMRC referred to as a competent professional. So that's generally what you'd consider a competitor business to yourself. Could they do what you're doing? And would they know how to do it easily? That's sort of your starting block in terms of what it is. Now, I've seen over the years clients in everything from the construction industry to the IT industry and farmers, the traditional ones you would expect. But if you talk about, for example, construction, it could be something along the lines of doing something that is um, helping out a room, for example, and the soundproofing. If there is significant improvement which is going on with, say, the soundproofing and something which, when triple glazing came in for the first time, for example, that's the sort of thing that was brand new and changing the way that everything works. So it's not necessarily just drugs, pharmaceutical world. It is a lot more to it, and it doesn't necessarily include the white coats. It could be all sorts of different categories out there as well.
Mhm. Does it have to be something as groundbreaking as a new innovation on a product or something that has never been done before, like AI, or is there sort of subtleties in between?
There absolutely is subtleties in between, and that's where the fun bit comes in, shall we say. So there is some very specific definitions of what research and development is. So in terms of the research side of it, the definition is that it's got to be original and planned investigation that's been undertaken. So it can't be that you've just stumbled across something. Now, obviously, you can stumble across something in the starting blocks, but from there, you've then got to actually progress it and plan to do something. And then moving on to the development side of things, it's where you've got to apply research or knowledge, and it's the creation or the enhancement of something which is in place. So it could be that there is something already in place. So if we go back to the triple glazing, we already had single glazing and double glazing. Triple glazing in many ways isn't a huge step, but it is an enhancement and it is that next step. And it's those sorts of things where it could be that it's not necessarily groundbreaking. It's not the new COVID drugs or anything like that, but it is something which is taking that step forward, and it is doing an enhancement to the field of science or technology as a whole. And that's where the interesting bits come in, and just trying to know what the rules are, obviously from a technical tax point of view, but also from, the person and the business itself. They know their industry, so they know whether what they're doing is something that's new for them, or is it new for the industry as a whole. That's where it's that nuanced side of it.
Right. Okay. There's the nuance. So triple glazing is only effective when you're the first to market on it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've got to be the first one. The next person that does it, they haven't done anything new. Somebody's already done all the legwork and to make sure that it is actually doable, that they can make sure there's no condensation between the windows, all of that technical stuff that's gone on. That's where, and it won't be that it's necessarily the whole project either that qualifies. It could be that there is bits within the project. So it could be, say, looking at triple glazing, it's not necessarily the entire magic that goes on. It's a tiny bit within there. It's how do they make glaze number 2 to number 3 work. That's the actual bit, which is the enhancement. Number 1 to 2, we already know what happens there. Going forwards, that's where the change comes in.
So we spend a lot of time on innovation and continuous improvement, and one of the things we do a lot of work on is process development. So it's actually the process of manufacturing to speed up, make more accurate, reduce errors, all that sort of thing. So is that the kind of thing that is also sort of does it have to be a new product? I'm saying, or can it be new processes, new
Absolutely. Yeah, so processes are absolutely a part of it. I mean, everybody thinks of a thing, a tangible thing at the end of the day, but a process improvement can also potentially be part of an R&D claim. And again, it just comes down to what it is that you're doing. Is it fundamentally changing the overall picture, or is it nuanced, tiny little changes? But there's often claims in the simplest things. And I know from your side you do your 2-second lean every morning.
Yeah.
And it will be that potentially there is something that comes from an initial chat at that level, moves on to something, and it's then when you move on to the next stage, it's doing that planned investigation and actually formally trying to do something. That's when actually the R&D tax credits and the relief could well come into play then.
Interesting. What about people's time on this? Is that part of the sort of the process? If I'm writing down all my R&D, is it just the money I'm spending on expert advice and prototyping, or is it the time that I'm spending on it as well?
So when you're looking at R&D costs and what qualifies, the biggest element for most businesses is their staff costs. For most businesses, that's the biggest cost that will be within the claim. So that staff cost is obviously the staff which are directly involved in doing the actual R&D work itself, but there is often indirect staff time. So that's the management of the process. So that could often include potentially the finance manager, but it's more likely to be an operational style level where they're actually involved in the process. And you would look to do a percentage of their time or a timesheet. It depends on the industry and what it is that's going on with them in terms of how you go about making that claim. Costs more generally, you can then look to do subcontractor costs, and the costs which are directly related, they're absolutely fine. It's the ones which are the indirects are the ones that people often miss. If you've got a specific software that you have to do that thing that you're working on, then you can probably claim for those costs. Or if you go and develop a brand new building just to do your R&D thing, then you can claim the cost of that building. Plus, they're obviously the staff doing the actual R&D as well. So it's not just the one aspect of purchasing something in. It's the overall cost to the business of developing the R&D item.
Okay. So there's lots of different elements to the claiming process. So to give a sort of real world example, sort of relating to our own business, for example, someone would bring us a new product that currently isn't being bent for bay windows, for example. And part of that process would be, first of all, testing it and getting prototypes built. So bending rings, things like that, formers, joiners, all these sorts of things that go for it. But also you'd have the team involved in experimenting with it. And you may have 2 or 3 members of the engineering team sort of playing around with it. And also we'd have sort of third-party people providing us with tooling and such like, and software developers writing it into our existing software. So what parts of that are sort of viable and non-viable, should we say?
I mean, potentially all of it, depending on what it is that's being done. I mean, in terms of your example there with the bending equipment, for example, you already have that equipment in place. It's the point where that project for that client or whatever it is that you're working on becomes something new that hasn't been done before. So whether it's going from, you know, a straight bend to an S bend, for example, if that was something that was brand new that nobody had ever done before, then potentially developing the prototype to be able to do that, that's then where the R&D would come in. But there's no straight line essentially. It kind of just depends on what the actual project is, and then allocating out the individual aspects of it within it. Like I say, because you can claim for tiny bits within it. It could be for whatever reason that it's one very special screw, and it's that screw is the R&D bit. Everything else could be completely standard, and it will completely depend on the circumstances. Every project is completely different, and you could be in a position where you've got 145 projects in a year that potentially are all R&D. It doesn't necessarily have one overarching one. It could be hundreds of tiny little ones.
Brilliant. So how would you go about sort of documenting and preparing for a claim?
So the documents and preparing everything has changed quite a lot over the last 3 or 4 years. So it is now mandatory to complete certain reports into HMRC. So we, as a firm, have always done what we've always referred to as a justification report. So it's a document that says these are the projects that going on, these are the costs that qualify, and this is why. It's just a rationale, refers to the legislation. That became mandatory a couple of years ago, that you now have to submit that level of information directly to HMRC. They call it additional information form, which is very snappy. And it literally is as it says on the tin. So you list out in there the costs that qualify, why they qualify, and the project work that you're doing. You also then these days have additional notification requirements that you have to put into HMRC. So if you haven't made a claim before, then you have to notify them that you're going to make a claim. If you haven't done a claim within 3 years, then you need to notify them again that you're going to be making a claim. But behind the scenes of all of that you put into HMRC, you've got to obviously make sure that your records are sufficient to be able to put in the claim in the first place. So obviously most people these days use electronic, Sage, Xerox, QuickBooks, whatever software it is they use. Now that will obviously maintain the big ticket items in terms of a purchase invoice. It's got that detail on there. But when it comes to things like salaries, that's often where the more nuanced workings come in, because there aren't as many industries as perhaps HMRC would like that do timesheets. So timesheets is great. If you've got them, then you can say, I worked for an hour and 45 minutes that day doing that. That's perfect and brilliant. And obviously you've got the backup records for HMRC if anything ever came out. If you don't have that, then you've got to come up with a just and reasonable basis for how you're calculating it. Now, we never want to get into a position where we're claiming for 100% of somebody's time, because it's just unrealistic. And that's where problems have come in the past. It's working out, maybe you do get for that person, get them to do a sample timesheet once a week or once a month, and try and come up with a basis for doing it. But it's the record keeping, and that's the fundamental bit that will lead into then doing the reporting to HMRC for the additional information form, the justification reports, and all of those.
It sounds like an ever-changing landscape. This sounds like something that could be a bit more technical. Is it something you could do yourself if I wasn't as an SME, or is it something that you need professional advisors to help you, guide you through it?
I mean, yes, you can do it yourself. Absolutely. The tax world is self-assessment. So you can always do these things yourself. I would wholeheartedly suggest that you get somebody involved to assist in the review process and the making sure you're claiming the right amounts at the right time and under the right legislation, because in amongst all the forms which have changed over the last couple of years, the actual schemes themselves have changed quite fundamentally over the last few years. So as we stand as of today, depending on what your year end is, we could be somewhere between 5 different schemes at the moment. So you want to make sure that you're in the right one. And obviously, we don't know what's going to happen for, October, November comes and the autumn budget. Who knows? But I would always say, yes, you can do it, but for that peace of mind, I would absolutely get somebody to check it over. And that's where professional advisors can come in and can give you that peace of mind that it has been checked by a third party who's on top of the legislation.
I'd certainly echo that sentiment, having fallen foul of the sort of rules and regulations, doing it myself, and having many successful claims afterwards with the right advice. So yes, I certainly agree with that. Although should you, is a very good question.
Oh, absolutely. And HMRC can always come back and inquire into things at a later point in time.
Well, the common mistakes that a small SME like me would make if I was filing for a claim?
Common mistakes, I would say, is in terms of making sure you're claiming under the right scheme, first and foremostly. It's getting those records right on the time and of the staff that are spent. That's the fundamental one, which is where the issues often come in. Duplicating time, missing time. It's having those records on that time is really the big one. But yeah, these days, right now, it's making sure you're claiming under the right scheme because they do change wildly between them. I mean, we have everything from the SME intensive, RDEC, merge scheme, intensive merge scheme. If you're on the wrong one, then HMRC will obviously not be very happy. And it's just going to cause you more headaches. It's just, you want to make sure you're doing it right from the very start.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you think I mean, I'm speaking from sort of experience. I've been involved in this world, and being innovators, we sort of and consider ourselves innovators. We're sort of very mindful of R&D. Do you think there's a lot of companies out there that are not taking the opportunities provided for R&D?
I think R&D I once heard described as the most overclaimed and underclaimed relief at the same time, because at points in the past, the number of people claiming it has been quite low, and there should have been more businesses claiming for it. But the ones that were claiming for it were claiming too much. So it's a really tricky one. But yes, there is a lot of more businesses out there which could claim smaller amounts, and those smaller amounts for the SMEs are very important. You don't want to get into a position where you're an SME starting out and you could have claimed, but you didn't. And then it's too late because you've run out of cash and the business has gone under. That's a horrible position to be in. So always ask the question. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Always ask.
Absolutely. What sort of things are changing in the landscapes of R&D at the moment?
I mean, going forwards, I hope not so much. But the last few years, it's been the schemes fundamentally is what's changed. But within the schemes, the biggest bit has been the availability to utilize overseas workers. So historically, we've always been able to claim for subcontracting work overseas. That has now changed, and you can't do that. Subject to what I refer to as the volcano test, which is essentially if you couldn't do it in this country, then that's absolutely fine. So volcanoes, we don't have any live volcanoes in this country. So if you're doing work on volcanoes, you have to go somewhere else to do it. So obviously you can claim for those R&D costs. But if it was something that you could do in this country, the fact that it's cheaper or for operational reasons you're choosing to do it overseas, you now can't claim for those costs. So we've known that those rules were coming in for a long time. So a few of my clients, they've changed their operations where it's viable to. Obviously, you don't necessarily want to change things just for tax if it doesn't fit the wider business operational model of the business. But it's that awareness of those, and the overseas one is the one which I think will catch out a few more people than it ought to over this year and moving into next year. And that's really the biggest one which has changed over the last 2 years, really. But fingers crossed, a bit of stability in the world, because I think that will help quite a lot, because businesses don't invest in certain areas when they don't know what's going on. They need to have a bit of stability. We all know that. And that's why generally the government have been trying to set tax rates a year or two in advance so that people know what's going on. And it's useful in the same way on other areas as well, whether it's R&D or whether it's inheritance tax. People like to know, and they like to be able to plan their businesses in advance. They can't just make snap changes. So hopefully, I say things should settle now that we're on the merge scheme. It should settle down now and hopefully it will give businesses some confidence to actually develop some R&D because they know what's going to go on with it going forwards.
Absolutely. If when the HMRC changes these rules, can they sort of look back retrospectively and a claim that was positive now becomes a more can then become actually now this doesn't qualify, or is it only going forward?
They tend not to. Sometimes it can be effective that day on certain taxes, but generally with R&D, it tends to be a case of if they're doing, say, the autumn budget in October, November-ish time, then it will be effective from April the following year, which in a business world isn't that long to actually put any plans in place. You look into 4 or 5 months, you can't do a huge amount in terms of making fundamental changes. But no, generally with R&D and taxes, they tend not to do a backwards looking. The only time you would ever look backwards is if it ends up being a court case and that changes the landscape more generally and an understanding, then potentially things go backwards. But autumn budgets, that sort of thing, it tends to be a look forward approach.
More forwards than backwards. That's good. What about
Yes.
what about companies that have maybe listening to this now, SMEs that might be listening to this now and thinking, I've never claimed for R&D. Should I have done, and can I look back at it and retrospectively make claims?
Possibly a maybe is my answer. It depends. With the new rules, a company, if they've never made an R&D claim, have 18 months from the start of their accounting period to tell HMRC that they're going to make a claim. So if you're, say, a 31st of December 24 year end, so the year's just gone, you're now too late. If you haven't told HMRC, you're now too late to put in that notification and you cannot make a claim for year end 24. So that's where the rules have been changed quite a lot to stop some bogus claims going in when people were going back a few years and making claims. If, however, you have made claims in the past, then you don't have to do that notification. You could go back to year end 24 and make your claim and potentially year end 23. But obviously, if you've done the claims, then you're in the system, and that's kind of not the issue generally on that area. It's more the new claims. So it just means if you think that there is something, get in touch with an R&D advisor, a firm of accountants, somebody in this world, and have a chat with them and get that notification in, because you still don't have to put in the R&D claim. Put in the notification though, because if you don't, you definitely can't do it. So
Hate your bets.
absolutely, it's a better to be half in than definitely out.
Absolutely. So if I was an SME listening to this and thinking this is quite interesting, I haven't done it in the past, but is it worth my while taking the time to look at what we're doing and what we've done to see what we can get back, or is the value not going to be a lot? Is there? I know it's a horrible question, like because it's twice the distance from the middle to one end, really. But is there a sort of idea you can give of what sort of the claim can give you?
That is a tricky question, because it absolutely depends on the business. I mean, it could be everything is in R&D is generally based on a percentage. So the amount that you're finally either getting back from HMRC or a deduction from your return or whatever it is percentage based. So you've got to work out for yourself whether that number is going to be relevant for you or not. Some businesses might sit there and go, you know what, for less than £100, it's not worth it. And the next person might come along and say, well, actually, because less than £10,000, it's not worth it. It really depends on the individual circumstances of that business. And obviously, you've got to make sure that if you're paying somebody to do it, it's got to be commercially viable for you as well. That's obviously a big part of it. But you want to make sure that it's the right thing. So yeah, worth having a chat. At the very least, have an initial chat with me, find out where the land lies, and then you can make an informed decision from there.
Well, I think one of the other things us SMEs don't do so well maybe is documenting things quite as things. How key is that to a claim, and and how accurate does if you're doing this retrospectively, like say, oh, actually, you know what, I might have done something this year, but I haven't recorded it. Is that something a missed opportunity, or is it something we now have to start thinking about when we're having meetings and working on things?
These days, with with the notifications that are required to HMRC and the additional information which you need to submit, the report, the background knowledge and the documentation of that is really, really important. Once you're into a scheme, I recommend to all of my clients that they keep notes monthly of what the projects are they're doing and some headline notes on it, because you can always go back and fill in some further information at the end of the year. But if you don't keep that initial level of, we were doing this, headline, this is what we were doing, this is the improvement in science or technology, this is why nobody else knew how to do it, which is why we're the market leaders in this area, that information can get lost. Because as you say, if we're looking at doing something now for year end December 24, and I come along as the accountant and tax advisor and go, okay, what were you doing in Jan 24? That's a long time ago for people to remember what they did for 2 hours in January last year. It just is tricky. So yes, document, write it down. Even if it feels silly and OTT to start with, it will get people into the right frame of mind and it gets them thinking about it. Because the more they think about it, probably the more they go, actually, maybe there is more that we could be claiming. But you've just got to get that process starting and just look at those key questions of, what am I doing? Or what is that advance in science or technology? Why am I doing it? Why could nobody else do it? Yeah, that's a big question. Why could none of my competitors do this? Why couldn't I walk into, a big shop and buy it off the shelf? They're the questions that are going to get you to the point of, is this an advance in science or technology? And then can I make a claim?
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that it's worth going back and looking at is now a lot of these meetings are done on Teams and are recorded using AIs, etc. One of the things we found very useful for last year's claim was actually going back through those and finding transcripts of conversations where someone brought something up and said, no one else does this, this is unique, with a external as well. So I think now SMEs probably have a better way of recording and keeping track of this stuff that is not so labor intensive as it used to be. So I think we can't use that as an excuse going forward anymore, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, the world of AI and tech is changing everything, and it is making life easier in many ways. Just as you say, that reporting and that being able to find out and go back retrospectively. What did we do in March last year? But if you've got these the AI tools, you've got the transcripts, that is going to make life so much easier for everybody. Just getting that initial bit going in your brain, and also then being able to backfill the information, or in terms of the actual technicalities of what did we do. We know we did something, but if you've got that transcript, it's all there ready for you.
Absolutely. Very useful now. Very useful
Yep.
now.
Absolutely.
Have you got any nice, happy cases of examples where people have just mentioned it and then from a casual conversation led to a very sort of positive outcome for the client?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the R&D world, it's a trickier one because it's less of a casual, because it has to be that planned process.
True.
But it can often start with that casual conversation in terms of, oh, we're thinking about doing something. When they've thought about and they're thinking about doing something, that's when it's often, we're having a conversation with them, whether it's the signing off the year-end accounts or me signing off the year-end tax work, whatever it is, and they go, oh, this is in the plan or the budget for next year. And you go, oh, actually, well, if you did that, then there's a potential that you can do the R&D claim. It's getting in that early stage at that casual level and getting them to think about it in the right way is absolutely where there's then the potential to make the claim further on down the line, because it is difficult to do it on a complete retrospective, because there needs to have been that plan to doing something from in their world. Um, yeah, I've got lots of clients who are, I say, in everything from IT industry, which most people wouldn't think has got anything in there at all, versus pharmaceuticals versus construction. And the construction one is one of the ones where there's often the most in there, because they are constantly pushing the boat in terms of what they're doing. And I will have chats with those clients once a quarter and go, right, okay, what are we doing? Is there something we can be looking to do, and is it worthwhile them doing it? And even if it's potentially not something which is R&D, it might transpire that actually it's something which is a claim for capital allowances, or you know something else really random that's going on in their world. It could be all sorts going on. I was having a chat with a client yesterday doing a hydrogen electric gas burner. potentially there's bits in amongst there. It's just knowing your clients and getting to know people, but it's getting at the front end. So that's the real bit. It's making sure it is front ended. You know what's going on, and then you can plan things in the most informative way to get the better results for everybody.
Brilliant. Excellent. Is there anything sort of that I haven't asked you that you think is key for an SME to know?
What's key for an SME to know? I think fundamentally, I think they just need to make sure that there is good records, good books are kept on everything, and that knowledge is written down. Like we said, you've got the AI reports, you've got all the transcripts, that sort of thing, but you've got the 4 or 5 questions which you're going to be fundamentally answering when you do the actual submission to HMRC. What is the advance in science or technology? You've got to be thinking about that fundamental question every time you're doing something in the R&D world. What is it that I'm doing? Why could nobody else do it? What is that improvement? Could my competitors not have done it? That's where you really need to be thinking on that world, to then be able to make sure you're in the right place to put in a claim. And you can always these days as well with HMRC, you can put in a notice to them saying, we're planning on making a claim. This is what we do. Do you think we'd qualify? You can do it early as well. And that means you've then got certainty from HMRC, and they will not inquire for the next 3 years. If they say, yes, what you're doing is R&D, it's done. And that definitely helps. Again, it comes back to that certainty of knowing what's coming up ahead. Who wouldn't want to have HMRC signing off on what you're doing for 3 years? That's great.
That's very good. Yeah, absolutely. So there's some good key takeaways there of what needs to be done if this sort of resonates. Where would you go to get help for this sort of?
I mean, as I sort of mentioned, I think absolutely get in touch with me if you want to have. I'll do a 1 hour free consultation, have a chat about the business and what might be able to be claimed, might not be able to be claimed. HMRC also have an awful lot of support on their website as well. Literally Google HMRC R&D, and it will be potentially too much information if it's the first time you're ever looking at it, but there is a lot of information in there that they have as well, and webinars. But just talk to somebody. Just talk to somebody, and they will be absolutely able to help give you some advice and some pointers with a view to hopefully making an R&D claim and making it successful as well.
Brilliant. And I think sort of as something that has occurred to me during this conversation is having that conversation not necessarily about the past when you meet, how was last year kind of thing, but what are you planning for the future? And even in this conversation, it's occurred to me that we're doing stuff that we've got plans to do stuff that I haven't even thought of yet. So just by talking and thinking about it, I think it generates opportunities that you can then discuss with discount, etc.
Absolutely. It's about, with most things in the business world, you don't want to be sitting there and going, well, let's look at last year. You want to be looking ahead, and you've got to treat things like tax in the same way. There's no point going, oh no, suddenly we've got to pay an X amount of money we didn't know. You want to be planning ahead for that. You want to be having it in your cash flow forecast and everything else. R&D should also fall into that same world, same as your capital expenditure. If you don't know what's going to happen next year, 6 months time from now, then that's going to make life tricky for doing any sort of planning or budgeting. So yes, 100% look forwards, and if you want to have a chat afterwards, more than happy to.
I think I will be. I think I will be again. Definitely got more. And having been stung on this in the past, actually, it's because we've done successful claims, or we've done claims that didn't were accepted to start with, and then retrospectively they re-looked at it. So I can understand completely the pitfalls that can fall on this if you don't do it right from the start. And from a personal perspective, I think although you can do it yourself, I think having that advice and someone to guide you and to ensure that all the documents are correct before they go, and to tell them, this is expected. And that's a really big win. And that's probably something I take away very much from this is the stuff we're thinking at the moment is probably not going to work. It's probably, it's pie in the sky stuff. But, I should be saying now, this is what we're planning. Would it count? Because if it does turn out, then I might have missed the boat a little bit,
It's the peace of mind of having a third party advisor involved. Absolutely gives you the peace of mind of making sure that, like you say, everything's dotted and crossed and things are submitted in the right place. From an administrative point of view, absolutely. But it's more than that. It's making sure that you've had a sounding board and you're running things through with somebody else, and I say just getting ahead of it as well. Definitely means you can have that conversation and go, well, maybe so and so does qualify, and just have that open and honest chat, as opposed to trying to remember the intricacies of something, say, 18 months down the line. That's a lot harder.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Lisa, for coming on today's Talking Heads podcast and demystifying for us. You've given us some really clear sort of next steps and some great advice. So I really appreciate that, and it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, no, thank you very much. It's been lovely talking to you as well, Kris. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.